Welcome, everybody, to Fresh Start for Fall webinar series from CatholicMom.com. I'm Danielle Bean here with my good friend, Mary Lenaburg. Hey,
Hi,
Mary.
everybody. Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Excited to do this webinar with you. So this is a series of webinars, Fresh Start for Fall. Last week, we had Lisa Lawmaster Hess sharing about organizational stuff, some practical stuff, but then she was really sharing about self-care. So that's really kind of the different take we're taking on Fresh Start for Fall here, which is really some personal fresh start for fall. I mean, the organizational stuff, that's evergreen, right? But this year with COVID, we've really got to take care of ourselves. And I'm excited to hear your topic tonight about getting past grief.
I'm excited to share. I think it needs to be talked about more because grief, when people think about grief, that they typically think about my father died, my mother died, but they're called all kinds of grief
Yeah.
in our world. So, and especially during a pandemic. So yeah, it's going to be good. I'm going to
Yeah.
share some things.
Yes, excited for that. So those of you joining us, why don't you leave us a note in the comments? Let us know who you are, where you're coming from, so we can know who's out there tonight. Excited to have you with us. And then as Mary's presenting, if something comes to mind that you'd like to ask, we're going to have a Q&A at the end of this session, a little bit of time at the end of the session for back and forth Q&A. So if you have a question, go ahead and put it right there in the comments, even during Mary's presentation. I'll be keeping track of those, and we'll be able to have a little bit of a discussion at the end of our time here. Oh, Father Jim's here. All is
Hey,
well.
Father Jim. That's awesome.
All is well when Father Jim is joining us. So glad you're here, Father. And so if you have comments, leave those in there, and we'll go through a little Q&A at the end of this. Also, there's a journal. So let me get that link for you. Actually, I might have the link already saved in my browser. Yes. Okay, so I just put a link into the comments that should show up in a moment there. That's a downloadable journal to accompany tonight's presentation. You don't need it to follow along tonight, but you'll want to download it and then spend some time after tonight, maybe right at the end of tonight if you have the time, just going through and spending a little time reflecting and answering those journaling questions on your own. It's a good way for you to kind of go deeper with the content that Mary's going to be sharing here tonight. Also, I have a link to Mary's book, and people always are going to want your book right after you talk, so I'm going to put this in right now. So this, I'm going to mark it as Mary's book. So Mary's book is Be Brave in the Scared. And if you have not read this book, do yourself a favor and get yourself a copy, because we all need this message of being brave in the scared. And Mary, you have such a beautiful way of sharing from your heart about these things that really matter to all of us. So thank you for writing that book.
Thank you. Yeah, that was all God. So, we can thank him too. Yeah, no, it was just, if you had told me back when I was in school where I hated to be that one day I would have a book with my name on it,
Right.
I would never have believed you. But God is good, and his mercy endures forever. So yeah, it was quite a privilege to write it.
I love it. That's beautiful. So yeah, check out that link and get a copy of Mary's book. She has another one that's coming soon. Do you have a pub date for your next book yet, Mary?
It's March of 2021. I don't know the exact date, but I believe it's in March. It's called Be Bold in the Broken: How I Learned to Be Courageous by Accepting God's Redeeming Love.
Beautiful. I love it. Wonderful.
So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it myself. So get us started here. I'm going to give you a little bit of a formal introduction to Mary for anybody who might not be familiar with Mary. Mary Lenaburg is a wife, a mom, author, and speaker, and a woman of God who really shares from her heart in authentic ways about the ups and downs, the good, the bad, and the ugly of everyday Catholic living. Absolutely love Mary's authenticity. So her book, as we said, is Be Brave in the Scared: How I Learned to Trust God During the Most Difficult Days of My Life. She's a longtime friend of CatholicMom.com and of me personally, and she just has a wealth of wisdom and experience to share with us all, and a beautiful pro-life, pro-motherhood, pro-faith, pro-trusting in God witness. And her whole life is a witness to all of those important messages that we all need so much. So tonight she's going to be sharing about getting past grief and learning to trust in Jesus. And I know that you are going to be blessed by all that she has to share. Welcome, Mary Lenaburg.
Thank you. Thank you, Danielle. That was very, very kind of you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Yeah, grief. That's an exciting topic, right? So when I was writing, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. When I was writing Be Brave in the Scared, that book is basically the story of my journey with God, my wrestle with God. If you think of the Old Testament story of Jacob, where he wrestled with the angel all night and then basically had a hitch in his hip for the rest of his life, that's what Be Brave and the Scared is for me. It's my wrestle with God, specifically in regards to my beautiful daughter, Courtney. So I have been married to my husband, Jerry, for 32 years, and we were blessed with 4 souls. 2 we did not get to hold this side of heaven. And then our daughter, Jonathan, he'll be so happy I called him that. Our son, Jonathan, is going to be 31 in November, and our daughter, Courtney, was with us for 22 years this side of heaven. So we're going to talk a little bit about Courtney and a little bit about Jonathan and this idea of grief and how do we heal from grief. So my daughter was born perfectly fine. Everything was fine. And then on the day of her baptism, when she was 5 weeks old, she began to have grand mal seizures. Those seizures continued throughout the rest of her life. Her official medical diagnosis was seizure disorder origin unknown with global developmental delay. So to the day she died, they had no idea why she had seizures. She just did. And then when she was 7 months old, we gave her a medication to try and help control her seizures. And instead she had an allergic reaction to it, and she lost her sight. Her brain swelled, damage was done. And for the remainder of her life, she never passed 7 to 9 months in development. So grief is something I'm very, very familiar with. One of the things I learned to do while Courtney was alive was to grieve what I thought would be. This is not something we talk about as mothers, right? We tend to compare our children to other children, which is we shouldn't do, but naturally as humans we tend to. We tend to look around and see, what other people are doing compared to what our child is doing. And for me, that was always so difficult because, of course, my child was in a wheelchair. She was blind. She was non-ambulatory. She didn't speak. And so, of course, she wasn't meeting any of the milestones that even her brother met or others met. And so it was hard. It was a hard 22 years. I cared for her physically, demanding to care for her. For 22 years, I basically lived in a mobile ICU unit here in our home. And so I know what it is to wake up one morning and think you're going to have one type of life, and God allows something to transpire in your life, and you end up making a complete 180 into a life you don't understand. And for me, that led to a journey of wrestling with God. I was angry. I was angry that he allowed this to happen to my daughter. I challenged him in the beginning, especially when we were in the ICU unit in the very beginning, that first week. I basically challenged him to a spiritual duel. And FYI, when you challenge God to a spiritual duel, you're not going to win that battle, but he is good and merciful and kind. And he knows the depth of your pain. And he is there to walk with you. God is faithful and true, and he never, ever leaves us. But I had to figure that out, right? I had to figure out that I could trust him. And I had to do that. It took me probably 12, 13 years of my daughter's life to actually come to this place of complete surrender and complete trust. And so in the beginning, I laid it out for him very specifically that I was unhappy. And he very intentionally said to me one evening in prayer, "Mary, do you love her?" Now, I'm kind of a rebel. I'm one of 8 kids. I'm number 2. I have 6 brothers and a sister, and there aren't very many rules that I like to follow in my life. And so I remember specifically when I was in that moment and he asked me that question in my heart, I was kind of sassy. And I said, "What are you, an idiot? Of course I love her. She's my daughter." And he simply said to me, "I love her too. And I don't make mistakes." And so when Danielle was asking me, "Mary, what is it that you want to share about this healing from grief, this healing and getting past things?" That's the first thing I want to make sure you know. God doesn't make mistakes. Death does not come from God. God can only love. Death is a result of sin in the world. And so if we were all still living in the garden, we wouldn't know what grief is because it was a perfect life. But we don't have a perfect life. And so there is grief and there is death. But here's the beauty of our faith. Death does not win, right? I was living a Good Friday life for many, many years. I was at the foot of the cross every day. After I began this relationship with the Lord, after I got over my sassiness and said, fine, I understand that you're allowing this for a purpose and a reason I don't understand. I mean, I get that you're allowing it. I don't understand the why. And he challenged me over the course of Courtney's life to lay that burden down. And so when it comes to grief and when it comes to moving through the stages of grief, that's the main message, right? It's surrender. God doesn't make mistakes. He can only love. He is faithful and true. But what God is asking of you, my sisters and brothers, is that you lay it down. I had to surrender my daughter to God. She wasn't mine. She was his. She's his daughter. I just got to love her a little bit this side of heaven. And so we walked through the first 7 to 8 years of her life trying to fix things, fighting with the Lord. Our marriage was a mess. Our son was having difficulty with his emotional health because we were angry all the time and we were fighting with one another. And he was trying to figure out how to express his emotions as we were dealing with all of the medical emergencies with Courtney. Because when Courtney, would have a seizure, she would stop breathing. So it was a crisis after crisis after crisis. So we had an experience when Courtney was 7 where we got to take her to Lourdes on a healing pilgrimage. And that experience of surrender, that experience of acceptance, that, Courtney was Courtney. There was nothing she could do to earn our love. She just was. She had it freely and fully. In that experience, we understood for the first time the mirror of Courtney's life versus our life with God. Courtney didn't have to do anything to earn God's love. She just had it. I don't have to do anything to earn God's love. I have it. It's freely given. And so we began to understand that Courtney's mission, her purpose, because every life has a purpose. Every person is unique and unrepeatable. They have a mission that is given by God. And if they don't complete that mission, nobody else will complete that mission. It goes undone because it's meant only for them. And what we came to understand about our daughter was that she had a mission. And her mission was quite simple. That was to show us the face of Christ and to love as Christ loved, which was very sacrificially. And so after that experience in Lourdes, we came home and we began to live our life differently. We no longer stayed in the house and kind of stayed away from public places like we were when she was younger for fear of embarrassment or fear of, drawing attention to ourselves. We lived boldly and freely because Courtney had work to do. And she couldn't use her hands and couldn't use her feet, but her parents could. And so we were her hands and her feet, and we went to Mass, and she was loved at Mass and at our parish. We went to the mall, and little kids would come up and ask questions, and we would be very open and very free with our answers. We never ever turned anyone away. If they wanted to come up and touch her hand and say hello and how are you and what would Courtney do if you did that? Well, Courtney would give you her personal handshake, which is she would lean her forehead and she would do forehead to forehead. That was her handshake. And so we broke down walls and barriers while she was still alive about what it is to have a disabled child and what it is to live with a medically fragile child. And that was not possible any other way but through surrender to God and acceptance for what he was asking us to do. That's the only way we could do that. And so along that way, that path that he had us on, I learned how to grieve. And here's the thing, my friends, grief happens every day. You are grieving something now. There is something that you are saddened about, something that you have lost, whether it be a job, a relationship, your parents have died, you've lost a child, a marriage is in trouble. You're grieving something. Grief is a part of life. The joy and the sorrow go hand in hand. There's a balance to it. And some days the sorrow tips the scales and some days the joy does. But grief is just a part of our path, our way of going until we get to heaven, because grief doesn't live there. That is pure, abundant joy. And so I had to learn how to grieve these stages of life that Courtney was not achieving. I had to grieve that, she wasn't going to be doing anything at the school science fair, or she wouldn't play soccer or dance like I did when I was in little tutus when I was a little girl. She wasn't going to be a doctor. She wasn't going to get married. She wasn't going to have children. She wasn't going to have a senior prom. She would never have a first kiss. She would never know that type of love. And so I had to grieve those things. I had to face that feeling, and I had to walk through that feeling. And the one person that was with me throughout it all, besides God, and thankfully my husband, was Our Lady. She's right there behind me. That's a photo, actually the painting that hung above Courtney's room for her entire life, hung above her bed. And that's one of my favorite images of Our Lady. And it's just so loving, and Jesus is just snuggled in, and they're just together, just breathing the same air. And that's my relationship with Courtney. We made a great team. And so I had to grieve these things so that I could make space for the joy that she was bringing my life. You have to let go of your old life in order to achieve a new. And I wanted to be free of the pain and free to love her fully, completely, to celebrate her wherever she was, because every child deserves that. They deserve parents that cheer them on and that make space in their hearts to love on an even deeper level. And so I realized early on in Courtney's life that in order to make room in my heart for that joy, for that devotion and that care, I had to grieve. I had to walk through the hard things. So there's a couple of things I learned in this process while she was still alive. And that was to trust God, that He had a plan. He knew what He was doing. He could see all the cars on the highway, and I can only see the car in front of me. He knew what was best for her, and He knows what's best for our family. And even though I might not agree with it, and I might not understand it, He is God and I am not. And so trust became very important. The second thing was choice. And when I use the word choice, I mean I have a choice every single day of how my day is going to go. I can either be a woman of joy and hope or a woman of darkness and despair. I have that choice. And even though the emotions are there and they're hard to carry sometimes, they're hard to process and move your way through, I still have the choice to either live in hope or to live in despair. And so I learned while she was alive how to move myself out of those dark places. I would move my body. I would get outside. I would put on praise and worship music. I would write a letter to a friend. I would have coffee with a girlfriend on my front porch while Courtney take a nap. And I would, take in the words of encouragement. I would pray with people. My husband and I had my mother who lived close by and my dad, and they would come and they would stay with Courtney so we could get a meal together, and know that she was cared for properly. We did what we could do within the means and the time that we had to make sure that we saw the light at the end of the tunnel. Now, when you're caring for a medically fragile child, when you're caring for a severely disabled child, there's a couple of things you learn. First and foremost, you learn to remain present. My spiritual director calls it the sacrament of the present moment. And it was one of the greatest gifts of Courtney's life, that lesson, to learn how to remain present in the day. I didn't worry about yesterday because I could do nothing about it to fix it. It was already gone. I didn't worry about tomorrow because with Courtney, she would have seizures. She would stop breathing. I didn't know if I was going to get a tomorrow. So I didn't worry about it. It took some time to get there. But once I stepped into that freedom, it made life so much easier. It drives people crazy now because I had 22 years of it. When they ask me, well, Mary, what's next week and what's the week after? I still struggle to tell you, I don't know, because I'm living today's Tuesday. I'm living Tuesday. I don't know what's on Wednesday. It's not Wednesday yet. It's Tuesday. It kind of drives my husband a little crazy. He's a planner, a logistics guy. So, But that was the gift of Courtney. And that's what it gave me, was joy. Because when she laughed, I was fully present for it. I wasn't worrying about something else. When she would smile, I was fully present for it. When she had a seizure, I was fully present for it and prayed through it, stayed attentive to her, pouring myself into her. Now, I have to give up these other things, right? The second thing I learned is sacrifice. There's so much sacrifice when you become a mom. First of all, you sacrifice your body, just to birth a child, or, you sacrifice your heart, no matter how you become a mother. And even if you are not a mother of body or through adoption, you're still a spiritual mother. So there's still sacrifice and pain that's associated with motherhood, right? That's part of being human. And so I sacrificed my body. And after I gave birth to her, I sacrificed my body in lifting her and physically caring for her for 22 years. When she passed away, she was 5'8" and weighed 100 pounds. So her heaviest, she was like 135 pounds. That's a lot of weight to lift from the bed to the wheelchair to her mat, to the wheel. But I did it. And I did it with joy, because this was my daughter and I wanted her to have the best experience, the best life I possibly could give her. And so I learned to remain present. I learned to sacrifice with joy. And again, I learned I always had a choice. I had a choice. There were days where the grief was so heavy and the sadness over the situation so heavy, I literally would put my phone away, close the door, and, put on an old musical and sit on the sofa with my daughter curled up in my arms. And I would weep. And I would pray over her. And I would beg God to change the situation. And I would beg him, maybe today's the day she goes to you and the suffering stops. And then I would say, no, don't take her yet. I love her too much. I can't imagine my life without her. Because that's the cross of having a special needs child. There are days that you are desperate for God to end their suffering. And then in a breath, you're like, no, I'm not. I need her. I love her. She has to remain here with me. And so I would just pour it all out. I would pour it all. I would just weep. And she would just snuggle in and she'd hold my hand. And she knew. She understood, because she was sacrificing too. She had said yes to God in what he is asking her, to give up a life and to love the way she was able to love. Anybody that thinks that there is nothing happening in a special needs child's heart or brain, you have no idea their capacity for understanding and their capacity for love. And it was so important to my husband and I that we understand Courtney's dignity as a human person, and that we give her a life of meaning and of joy and of love and of laughter and of faith. Even though she couldn't say, I love you, Mom, even though she couldn't agree with, she didn't like those shoes, or she didn't want that blouse on. She couldn't communicate in that way, but she had other ways. She was a very sassy young lady, hated peas, didn't like shoes, hated to have her hair brushed, and she let you know it. She was Courtney, fully and completely, uniquely Courtney. And so December 27th, 2014 arrived. And by that time, Courtney was 22 and her body was tired. And I had been praying for many, many years that when the time came and God was going to bring her home, that he'd be very direct with me in this trust and in this surrender of Courtney's life. I had built a relationship with the Lord, an intimacy with him, that I could be, let's just say, a little demanding. And I kind of told him in a very mama bear kind of way, like, can you please just tell me when it's time? Don't let me miss this moment where heaven and earth meet. Don't let me miss this moment. And so December 27th, 2014 at 1:51 in the morning, that moment arrived. And it was such a beautiful death. I couldn't have asked for anything more gentle and more filled with love. As I held her in my arms and sang, Hail Mary to her, because I used to sing that all the time. And I knew it was soon. Every indication was present that it was soon. And so I thought, the hearing is the last to go. And so I thought, okay, Lord, let these be the last words she hears from her mother, that she is beautiful and she is precious. And that I look forward to the day that I am greeted at the gates by Jesus and my daughter. And it was the most beautiful day of my life, because I knew that my blind child, who had been blind since the age of 7 months, would open up her eyes in heaven. And my child, who couldn't walk and couldn't talk, would be saying, Jesus, 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 and running straight to his arms. And I wanted that so badly for her. And it was the worst day of my life, because I knew that I would never, ever hold my child again. And that's really hard. That's a hard, hard thing to carry for the remainder of your life. To know that you won't hear their laughter, you won't see their beautiful face, you won't hold them, won't feel the physical weight of them in your arms. I think that's the hardest part about grieving, is the physical separation. I know it is for me. But what did that moment teach me? And how 6 years later am I able to live a life with joy? Well, for starters, I know where my daughter is. I know she's a saint in heaven with a little s. And I know she's a tremendous intercessor. And I know not everybody that is grieving has that assurance. Pardon me. And so I pray, I intercede for other moms who have those questions. I don't know if my child is in heaven. I don't know. They have questions. And so I take the peace that I have and I intercede for them. And that's one of the beautiful things I can do. That's one of the ways I have walked through grief. That's one of the ways that encourages me to keep walking through grief, is that sacrifice again, to offer it up for another. The second thing is a choice. Like I said before, the choice that I had to make when Courtney was alive is the same choice that I have to make in grief. I don't remember really the first three months after she died. I couldn't tell you what happened. I remember her funeral, and it was a beautiful mass. And I remember standing next to her grave as they lowered her body. And I remember holding my son Jonathan's hand in one hand and holding my husband Jerry's hand in another. And I said to them both, don't ever forget the lessons we learned from this child. Don't ever forget how precious her life is and was and will be. Because I think what God has in store for us as a family is bigger and bolder than we ever imagined. Because he spent 22 years preparing us for it through the gift of this child. And so I have a choice to make every day. I have a choice to get up and to see the positive, to see the joy. I have a choice to close the doors and the windows and to curl up on the couch and just weep, if that's what needs to happen. And I want you to know that if that's something you're walking through right now, don't feel bad about that. Deep grief just means that you loved deeply. The deeper the grief, the deeper the love. But God doesn't want you to stay in darkness. Courtney would be so mad at me if I was still curled up on the couch every single day. She doesn't get mad at me when I curl up on the couch 2 or 3 times a year and it just is overwhelming to me and I have to be quiet and I have to let it all go. Because that's grief is in waves and ebbs. It's like the ocean coming in and going out. And each time it brings something with it and takes something away. And time does not heal all wounds. Time does heal the pressure of it. Time takes some of the edges off the grief. but I will grieve for my daughter until the day I take my last breath. But here's the thing, my friends, grief does not define my life. Love defines my life. Grief is a part of my story. It's like the ivy that wraps its way around a tower, and flowers in the spring. It doesn't define me. It doesn't keep me in one place. It's just a part of who I am. I don't want to forget my grief because I don't want to forget the power of my daughter's life. But it doesn't define my everyday. And that is a choice that I make. It's a choice to walk in hope and light. And there are some days I do it better than others. But I want to encourage you tonight, when it comes to self-care when you're grieving, that's the biggest thing. Pay attention. I know myself really well. I tend to be an emotional overeater. So when I grab the cookies before I grab my novena book, I know I need to go to adoration. I know I need to go to confession. I know I need to figure something out, right? So to understand myself, to understand how God made me and how I grieve is important. And so what do I do to take care of myself? Well, I make sure I physically move my body every day. I do not run. Danielle runs, God bless her. No. Unless, like a serial killer is chasing me, not happening. But I walk every day and I hike every day. And I love to feed people. So I try and do that in a healthful way, right? I surround myself with people that I feel safe with, that I can talk about Courtney. Courtney is still in our home. There's pictures of her everywhere. Her tennis shoes hang over by the lamp. Her baseball hat is over here on the other side of the room. This picture was above her bed, and then the crucifix that's above it was the one on her coffin. She is actively part of our life. I don't hide her away. It doesn't hurt me to see her picture. It brings me joy. And I get to share those memories with my husband and my son and the people that come and visit our home. We don't hide away from the grief. We face it. We deal with it. We roll through the punches. And it takes practice. It takes time. It wasn't this easy on year 1. It wasn't this easy on year 2. It's not easy now on year 6. But it is possible. And when I get really, really knotted up, I go to adoration. And I put on this little playlist in my earbuds of all the songs I sang my daughter. And I pour my heart out. And I tell them how much I miss her. And I tell her how much I miss her. Because here's the thing, my friends. Courtney stands right behind the veil. She stands right behind the veil. Wherever God is, she is there praising him, right? She might not physically, she might actually be in the church, but she's right behind the veil between heaven and earth. So the closest place I can be to her is in Mass. At that moment of the epiclesis where heaven, where we're whooshed up into heaven, she's right there. I'm right there. And I can almost touch her. Almost. One day, if God is good and merciful, which he is, and he lets this old sinner in those gates, one day. Grief is hard. This is the hardest part of life, I think. To have loved so deeply, to hurt so much, to have this void not be filled. The thing is it can be filled with God. Jesus is sitting right here. His mother is right here with me. Their arms around me. We understand, Mary. We know. We know. You're going to be okay. Courtney's going to be okay. Your family's going to be okay. It's going to suck noodles, but it's going to be okay. And that's why my intimate life with God is the most important thing. If you hear nothing else from this talk, know this. To know God means you have to spend time with him. To understand his heart and his purpose means you have to be in his word and listening. To receive healing and to be able to choose the hope over the darkness, you have to be in relationship with him. You have to receive the sacraments. You have to be in active pursuit of him, because he never once stops pursuing you. I am able to rejoice in life and celebrate life and laugh in life because I know who God is and who I am in him. I still have a lot of work to do. There's still a lot of things that I got to work my way through. And grief is a part of that. But he is faithful and he is true. And he will never ever leave my side. And he will never ever leave yours. So the greatest self-care I can do for myself as I walk through the ebb and flow of this grief is to remain close to him, because he's the one that gave me the gift of my daughter. He's the one that gave me the capacity to love my daughter. He's the one that loved her so much he brought her home when he did. So she is free and interceding for an eternity. He is my beloved, in whom my soul rests. And so that is the greatest gift you can give yourself, is the gift of faith. And with that sometimes comes doubt. And with that sometimes comes questions. But God is a big God. And he's not afraid of those. And he's given us beautiful tradition, sacred tradition, the catechism, the magisterium, the Bible, so many things to help us remain in that relationship, to encourage us. And so what I leave you with is the understanding that you have a choice. I can choose to stand up and live my life and honor my daughter and the legacy of love she left behind. Or I can choose to sit down and allow Satan to cover me like a dung heap of sorrow and anger and bitterness. And in the name of my daughter, I stand and I choose light because I can. So I hope that helps you. Now I know Danielle is going to hop back on and we're going to do a little question and answer. Woo!
Okay. Can you hear me, Mary?
I can.
Okay. Oh
Sorry
my
about
gosh.
that. Whoosh, I didn't expect that.
It was so beautiful. I'm sitting here wiping my tears like, why
I don't
did
know
I
why
turn
I
on
put on
mascara?
makeup. Yeah, exactly. Like, why did I do that? Yeah.
I know you're a beauty counter rep, so I'm going to have to ask you for some waterproof recommendations before I ever listen to you
I've
speak
got
again.
those. No worries.
That was so beautiful, Mary. Thank you so much. That was truly just, I mean, so inspiring and uplifting about such a tough, tough topic. God's really given you a gift, Mary, for speaking to people inside of this very difficult thing. So, Emily is tuning in here saying she was crying as well. I know you were causing a few tears out there tonight because
sorry, not sorry.
Good. It is good. And I so appreciate your message, Mary. The one thing that really stood out to me was how you were sharing about choosing, that we get to choose. And I think that's such a powerful message that we need to know, because sometimes I know I'll do this in my life when I'm struggling with something, when I am hurting with something. It's tempting to think I'm a victim of it all. And I have no choice, but I'm stuck. I'm a victim. I've got this bad thing in my life, this bad thing going on, and I'm just suffering. But it's such an empowering message that you share about you can choose to hope, you can choose joy. And maybe you could share just a little bit about, what if you're not feeling it? Can you choose it anyway?
Emotions. I love emotions. Yes. Well, one of the things I learned throughout this entire process is, yes, we all have a choice. It's free will. It's the greatest gift God ever gave us, was our free will, right? How did I choose and how do I continue to choose? Well, my choice is rather simple. All of our choices are rather simple. My dad used to say to me all the time, there is one choice you have to make every single day that is uniquely yours to make. Has nothing to do with anybody else. It's just uniquely yours. And that's if it's going to be a good day or a bad day. And it used to drive me crazy when he would say it, because I am the world's greatest martyr. Oh, the drama of growing up, Mary, is just, oh, the stories I could tell. Like, you want me to clean the bathroom? I have 6 brothers. That's disgusting. I'm not doing that. And then I would flail about, there was always something wrong, right? Well, that's not fair. Everything's not fair. And I heard that, I said that a lot and I heard that a lot. But my dad would come in and he would say, but you have this power. You have this power that is uniquely yours. And you're either going to give it away or you're going to hold on to it and work with it. And that was the power of choice. And so I never forgot that lesson. My dad's been gone now. He died almost 20 years ago. And the last 10 years of his life, he suffered from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He went through 7 rounds of chemotherapy. He suffered. He was a warrior. He suffered greatly. And he always chose that was an honor for him, that he could suffer for others. And that's how he lived. Now, he was a functional alcoholic till I was 19. So it's not to say the man was perfect. He had a lot of demons in his life, but he taught me that. And he was diagnosed with cancer when I was pregnant with Courtney. So the two of them always had this very close connection of suffering. And he used to remind me, Mary, it's a choice. It's a choice. And it's okay to choose to sit down for a while. That's a legit choice. If you're exhausted, you're overwhelmed, you don't know how it's all going to turn out, and you just need to sleep or you just need to rest, that's okay. But when it starts to linger for a day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks, that's when it becomes an issue. And it becomes, the longer you let it linger, the harder it is to choose. So when we have these emotions that tell us, sit down, little girl, just sit down, you're good. We don't feel like doing it today. Just sit down. It's kind of like the difference between when am I going to put on my yoga pants or my jeans? Like, what kind of day am I going to have, right? It's the same kind of choice. And so what I've learned is to discern when I need to sit down, like legitimate need to rest, or I need to spend some time in quiet and grief and kind of release those emotions, because emotions, they're nothing to be afraid of, but they're not the boss of us. And therefore we can say, yes, I need to cry today. I need to cry today. I need to go for a walk. I need to go to her grave. I need to see her. I need to be as close to her physical presence as I can be. Whatever that is. I've learned to pay attention to that. But I also learned to pay attention to, when it kind of goes into overdrive and when Satan's sort of pressing and he's like, but let's talk about your motherhood. Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you love her perfectly? Did you do this? And then you're feeling like, oh my gosh. And then you feel guilt, and guilt is not of God. And then you feel stress, and stress is not of God. So I've learned to recognize when I'm not feeling it, what is it? Where is the basis of it? Is it, do I need to just love her through my tears today? Or do I need to say, not today, Satan, I'm going to choose light? And it's taken some time. And that's what that personal relationship with Christ does. It clarifies what is being said in your mind with those emotions and which direction do you walk. Do I do it perfectly? No. That's why we have confession. Thank you, Lord, for the sacrament of reconciliation. But yeah, emotions are hard. And when you're grieving, there's an awful lot of them.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of learning yourself, learning who you are, learning how you work. What is your personality? Are you more adept at processing through writing? Are you more intellectual? Are you more emotional? Are you, where are you? Empathetic? Where is it, right? But that comes through experience, just time. I'm going to be 53 in a week, so I've had some time to figure out who I am and how I work.
Right. Well, I think that's really wise what you're describing there about discerning when you're feeling things. It's okay to be feeling them, right? But discerning those voices, discerning what you're listening to, and where it's coming from. And, that I think is another major point that I really want to underscore about what you shared here tonight, was that connection with God is truly what it all needs to be rooted in and based in, is that relationship with God. If you're not spending time in prayer, spending time in his word, that you're going to have trouble discerning his voice from someone else's, right?
You absolutely do. And that's another thing. Like, emotions aren't bad. Let's be very clear. They're not bad. God gave us emotions. We need them. Right. But that's that idea of discernment and personal relationship. I can be feeling one way when I get up and not sure how the day is going to go. And I can feel myself like, okay, Mary, it's going to be, I feel the heaviness of it. I feel it. It's here. Well, what are we going to do with it? And then I'll go and I'll say morning prayer and I'll read the scriptures for the day, from Mass. And there'll be something in there, there'll be a verse. The saint for the day will speak to me. And in some way, it's almost as if Courtney's saying, I hear you, Mom. I'm right here. Like, don't go there. It's okay. We're here. We're good. And then there are other days where if I don't do that, or I go a day or two without doing that, I mean, I'm yelling at people. I'm like really short tempered. I'm eating all the cookies. I'm like, let's bake 5 million pies. I mean, I'm just, and Jerry will look at me and he'll go, when was the last time like you went to adoration? He doesn't usually ask me the confession question because he's smarter than that, but he'll
that would be rude.
Exactly. He's like, he'll be, when you've overslept the last 3 days, what's going on? How is, you typically get up at this time, you do these things. So, when you've been married for 32 years, you know each other very well, and you can see when one is beginning to slide off the path. And that's, not everybody has that. I know that a lot of people that are grieving are single parents and they don't have that balance there, but you have God always. You always have him. And there is nothing that you experience that Jesus didn't experience first. He lost Lazarus. It's the shortest sentence in the Bible. He wept. He knows what it is to feel that deep, deep grief. His mother knows. His mother held his broken body in her arms, and she knew what was coming. She knew how it was going to end. Maybe not the exact details of everything, but she knew, she knew what she was walking. And yet she did it with joy, and she did it with wisdom and with grace. Now, mind you, she didn't have sin. Okay, that makes it a little easier, but, she still walked it. She still had a choice to make.
Right.
And that's the big thing, is that we have a choice to make, and we're not going to do it perfectly every day, but we got to try.
Right.
Courtney was worth trying for. She's worth, and that's what I think of. My daughter's life is worth that. I honor her by getting up every day and pressing on in the work that God still has for me to do. That's the other thing is, like I said, when we were standing at her grave, God is preparing us for something. He doesn't just bring you through all of that to leave you there. Right. Love, Bob Goff says all the time, love never leaves you where you are. Bishop Barron says, love demands a cost. There's a price to pay. And so we loved, and there was a price to pay, but there's a reason for it. It's God uses everything for our good and his glory. So I'm walking now in a different season, and I don't always see the reason for that, but I still walk, and I still choose to honor him. Right. Imperfectly, but I do it.
And honoring Courtney as well, through the beautiful sharing that you've done here tonight, through the work that you do, through the books that you write. Mary, you're such an inspiring witness for all of us that are struggling in similar ways, in different ways, in ways that have parallels to the kinds of griefs that you've experienced. But to each of us, it's unique. But I'm so grateful to you, Mary, for sharing so vulnerably and so honestly, and just with such abandon. And I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for the gift of just sharing your soul with us, because it truly is a beautiful thing. And you're inspiring so many people and continuing to share the gift that is and that was Courtney's life with all of us in that way. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you for having me. It's, any opportunity to talk about Courtney is a gift to me. And she is an intercessor waiting to be asked. She's really great with plumbing and car problems.
Appliances. Yeah.
Yes, appliances. She's really good with that. She's a practical girl, my Courtney. So I just, I mean, here's the thing. Every life matters. Every life has worth, value, and dignity. And for me to not talk about her and for me to give into this darkness doesn't honor her and doesn't share her joy. And so that's what he's asking me to do. And that's what I'll continue to do.
Well, we are grateful for it, Mary. And we're going to be praying for intercession in the coming weeks. If people keep us posted. If you're praying to St. Courtney for anything, let Mary know. But thank you so much, Mary, for sharing from your heart here tonight. Thank you for the gift and of your loving witness and inspiration.
Excuse me. You're welcome. Sorry.
And thank you all for joining us here tonight. We're thrilled that you can be a part of this session of our Fresh Start for Fall webinar series with Mary Lenaburg. Again, use that link that's at the top of the comments here on Facebook to download your free journal so that you can go through and spend a little time processing some of what Mary has shared with us here tonight. And then also there's a link to Mary's book, which is Be Brave in the Scared. And you're going to want to check that out and be looking for her next book coming in the spring of 2021. Thank you, everybody. God bless you. Take care. Good night.
Good night.